What's up, everybody? Welcome into the CSN studios. I'm Sebastian Salazar, and this is Real Fantasy, where every week we get you ready for your weekly fantasy battles, be they of the daily or season-long variety. We got NFL reporters stationed across the country with all the latest news as it pertains to the world of fantasy. We're just hoping to give you the edge as you move into the second half of your fantasy season. First things first, let's introduce the crew that's brought us this far. We have Kay Adams from the NFL Network. Follow her on Twitter at HeyKayAdams. And of course, Josh Norris, also on Twitter at Josh Norris. You can find his work on NBC Sports and at rotoworld.com. Guys, thanks so much for joining us. Let's get right to it. Our quick hits. And we are literally straddling the fence on the fantasy season. 7 weeks down, 7 to go in most setups. And so far, there have been plenty of great performances. Drew Brees, the best QB through 7 weeks of play. David Johnson leading the way amongst an injury-depleted running back core. And at wideout, where lots of folks took Antonio Brown first overall, it's actually Julio Jones putting up the most points. So I'm not going to question whether or not those guys can keep it up. All seem pretty well positioned for the second half. But I do want to look at some of the other top scorers and see what we think of their second half potential. Josh, let's start with you. We're going to quickly look at a list of top 10 running backs so far. Of this list, whose numbers are you maybe most worried about in the second half?
Yeah, and he's firmly in the top 10, and that's Melvin Gordon. I would suggest that at the very least, he's going to fall down that list. Obviously, he leads the NFL in touchdowns right now, including 8 rushing touchdowns. But on the other side of the coin, he's only 16th in rushing yards per game. At some point, that will average out, that will even out. And Phillip Rivers is going to start throwing touchdowns. This means fewer opportunities for Melvin Gordon. I think it starts this week against the Denver Broncos, when the last time they faced off just a few weeks ago, he was the running back 27. And if I had to nominate someone to, fill his spot, it'd be Christine Michael, who has a great matchup this week against the Saints. I think he continues to be kind of a focal point of that offense because Russell Wilson certainly can't be at K with his injured knee.
Guys, I know Christian Michael's obvious start against the Saints, but he's feast or famine for me in a season-long setup. I keep missing him.
Believe this week.
All right, let's turn our attention to wideout. A couple names among the top 10 scores that do kind of surprise me. Michael Crabtree is one in Oakland. He had the huge game against Baltimore in Week 4, 3 touchdowns. And then there's the much-discussed, at least on this show, Marvin Jones. Kay, are both those guys really top 10 receivers by the time this season's done?
Michael Crabtree, all he does is catch touchdowns. I like him. I think he does end up in the top 10 there. Amari Cooper, I don't think ends up outside the top 20, but I do like Crabtree. Marvin Jones, I say he's out when all is said and done. Listen, he had a spectacular start to the season, a hot start, but he hasn't seen even 8 targets in a single game since Week 2 of this season. So and his fantasy points have regressed and gone down with the emergence and the balance of this offense as far as Golden Tate. We talked last week about how his former Detroit Lion Nate Burleson told me that once Matt Stafford finds a guy or it starts working, it starts clicking, that rhythm develops and it doesn't really go away. So I think that Golden Tate is a bit more of a great option in this offense. I'm not saying to drop Marvin Jones. I think he'll still be a top wide receiver. I'm just saying I don't think he ends up in the top 10 when all is said and done.
All right, lots of moving and shaking on the waiver wire the past couple of weeks. Niall Davis was locked out of the Packers backfield a week ago. Matt Asiata getting an increased role in Minnesota with Jerick McKinnon banged up. And the aforementioned Eric Ebron has been hurt but is close to returning for Detroit. On top of all those weapons up in Detroit for Matt Stafford and the Lions. All right, guys, so Halloween coming up. Let's get into the spirit here. We'll use a waiver wire for some trick or treating. We picked some players who are currently unowned in more than 50% of leagues. So, guys, you might have a shot out. We want to know if each guy is more trick or treat. Okay, let's start with you. Dion Lewis, close to returning for New England. And we all know how much you love Patriots running backs.
I don't, man. Trick or treat on Dion Lewis. It's like a treat and then a trick because it's like getting all the fantastic candy, the Kit Kats and the Snickers and the Reese's, and then you eat all of it and you have a headache afterwards and a stomach ache because that's what it will be week in, week out with Dion Lewis. He is a difference maker, but I'm already hearing things up in New England. They're going to split the workload and the reps between him and James White, who's been so effective, and that is the last thing you want to hear as a fantasy owner. That's like getting raisins on Halloween.
Is it time for Chris Thompson to get the ball more in Washington? Got 19 touches last week.
Are you trying to tell me that Chris Thompson isn't more than 50% owned, Sebastian?
42%, Kay. Can you believe it? That's why people watch the show, because they need help.
That is a joke. In a PPR situation, he is like a king-sized candy bar on Halloween. It's a trick-or-treat. It's amazing, absolutely. 12 carries, 73 yards. He had 40 receiving yards. You mentioned Matt Jones, banged up, fumbled the ball 3 times, going up against the Bengals, who've given up 7 catches to the running back spot in the past 2 weeks. This week, he's a must-start RB2. Is he going to get the full workload? No. Rob Kelly, is he a thing? Absolutely. But Chris Thompson continues to be impressive and effective and mostly productive. PPR, play him.
All right, let's go down to the bottom of the candy bag, the stash. Maybe a guy who could help you win your league or could end up just being a wasted roster spot. That's Corey Coleman, close to returning from injury in Cleveland. Josh?
He's kind of like that new family in your neighborhood that's, obviously new, that you don't know a lot about, and you might go to their door. They might give you Tic Tacs or you get a king-size candy bar. It's one or the other, right? Corey Coleman, I absolutely love. This is a treat for me because he's a huge big play threat, was my top-rated receiver coming out of the draft last year. And Sebastian, let me read you his schedules in weeks 10, 11, and 12. That's Baltimore, who he already torched, Pittsburgh, and the New York Giants. I think Corey Coleman, when healthy, and maybe the rest of this offense can get healthy at quarterback, I think he can have some huge weeks, especially with the buys creeping up on everyone. I think he'll be at least a wide receiver 3 in a handful of those matchups.
Coleman hasn't played since week 2, but he did have, as you mentioned, 2 touchdowns against the Ravens early on in the season. All right, guys, thanks very much. Don't go far. We'll have more from Kay and Josh a little bit later on in the show. But time now to go around the league, and we'll start in Chicago, where it looked like Jordan Howard was going to be the guy running the ball for the Bears. Then last week, Howard played second fiddle to Kadeem Carey, a real head-scratcher. But John Mullen of CSN Chicago knows what's happening in the Bears' backfield, and he begins this week's cheat sheet.
Well, the 2016 Bears made a statement early that they were going to run the football and then have not been consistent about doing it. More than that, they haven't been consistent about who they've been doing it with. They've had 3 different leading rushes in the span of 7 games. Jordan Howard rushed for over 100 yards twice and then was basically shut down against the Green Bay Packers, only getting 7 carries. Kadeem Carey came off the bench. Kadeem Carey is a very popular running back with coaches because he runs so hard. Jeremy Langford coming off an injury. They're unsure how much action he's going to see. So it's not a really good team to go picking running backs for fantasy leagues.
All right, let's keep it in the Midwest and pay a visit next to Indianapolis, where Jack Doyle was an afterthought back in the summer for the Colts, though now he's emerging as a must-start tight end. So what happens when Dwayne Allen is fully healthy? Jason Spells of NBC 13 in Indy has more.
Doyle is quickly becoming one of Andrew Luck's top targets. He's tied with T.Y. Hilton for touchdowns this year at 4. He's second to Hilton in receptions and yards receiving. Keep in mind, last summer, there were a lot of question marks about the Colts tight ends. Many thought Doyle would just be a roster filler until this team could replace Coby Fleener. Instead, Doyle has proven to be better and more reliable than the former second-round pick Fleener. And he's become a big target in this team's red zone package. With Dwayne Allen out due to a sprained ankle, one thing is clear: Doyle is one of this team's biggest threats.
All right, from Indy, we go down to Tampa, where receivers are dropping like flies. And while fantasy owners might want it, Jameis Winston can't pass the ball to Mike Evans on every play. Enter little-known Russell Shepard, 5 catches and a touchdown against the 49ers last week. Is it a sign of things to come? Dan Lucas of NBC News Channel 8 in Tampa has the answer.
After the Buccaneers win over the 49ers, wide receiver Russell Shepard joked that his 77-yard day was 1/3 of his career total. Well, he was wrong. He was actually closer to half. But Shepard earned that shot as the team's second receiver thanks to a tremendous camp and by taking advantage of his chances. Right now, he's one of just 3 reliable targets at receiver, along with Mike Evans and Adam Humphries. Now, keep an eye on the imminent return of Louis Murphy from an ACL injury. That would mean less opportunities for Shepard down the road. But the Bucs' next 2 opponents, the Raiders and the Falcons, are the bottom 2 teams in the NFL against the pass.
You guys paying attention? Sounds like Russell Shepard could be a pretty good deep sleeper. Next up, we head to Facebook to take your questions, propose trades, who to start, who to sit. Our experts, Kay and Josh, are back to answer all your queries. And anyone playing their studs against the Cardinals defense should probably think twice. So with Arizona visiting Carolina this week, what does our resident general manager, Charlie Casserly, think of Greg Olsen and Kelvin Benjamin's chances for a big breakout game? That and much more still to come here on Real Fantasy. All right, welcome back to Real Fantasy. Sebastian Salazar with you from the CSN studios. This is the part of the show where we head to Facebook to take all your fantasy questions, but a quick programming note on that front. Next week, our Facebook Live, which you can join through your local CSN page, will be Wednesday at 2:45 p.m. Eastern instead of the usual time on Thursday. Got it? Good. Without further ado, here's the best from this week's Fantasy Facebook Live. I have Allen Robinson and Alshon Jeffrey, but let's focus on Jeffrey. I hate his matchup this week, and I know Jay Cutler's healthy-ish, but should I just cut ties at this point? I mean, I keep starting this guy and just not seeing the reward, Josh.
No, you shouldn't cut ties. I mean, he's still one of the more talented receivers, top 15, top 20 talent. And we want to see how he looks with Jay Cutler coming back in the fold. Now, you're talking about this week, and just talking before the show, this Facebook Live, you mentioned you also have Kelvin Benjamin and Stephon Diggs. Kay, I would play Stephon Diggs over Alshon Jeffrey this week and feel great about it because we know Minnesota's a fantasy eraser, and Jeffrey has not been great in terms of a game flow independent type standpoint here.
Yeah, I like the matchup for Stephon Diggs in this one. Chicago's allowed the most receptions to opposing wide receivers, 120 catches this year. I know he hasn't been, great, but there's 6 weeks, 6 teams on a bye. If you have Stephon Diggs, given that matchup, you have to play him. I think game script actually will be in the favor of him having a good game as well. Alshon Jeffrey, you can't get rid of him now. Cutler's his boy. They're boys. Hopefully, if he comes back, they can get something going.
Would you trade Jay Ajayi, kind of a sell-high situation, for Devontae Booker? So it doesn't look good for C.J. Anderson in Denver, and Booker's suddenly owned in about 85% of leagues. What do you think, Josh?
Well, I think both have a legitimate shot to finish the season as top 10 running backs. The thing is, Jay Ajayi's already there. He's a top 10 running back so far this season on a fantasy points per game basis. Devontae Booker, you're projecting a little bit now. I expect Devontae Booker to have maybe 85% of the carries in this offense. That is a run-first attack, as we know. I still, because I think the team is really coming together, at least offensively with that offensive line, will lean Jay Ajayi in the situation. But, Kay, this is a very, very interesting question, and one I'll think about actually probably after the show.
It's too hard to answer. I hate this trade.
Is.
I hate this trade, and I probably wouldn't do it on karma alone because it is so close. You're taking a guy who you should probably sell high on. He's not going to keep having 200-yard games there in Miami. But Booker, there's a little bit of uncertainty there. Granted, we kind of can read the writing on the wall, and he's got a role, and he's played on more and more snaps. C.J. Anderson banged up. They've got a good schedule as well. I don't know if I could deal Ajayi.
All right, guys, we came into this segment with a desperate receiver situation. Let's go out with one as well. Jose says, literally, I'm desperate. John Brown or Cameron Meredith. Cameron Meredith was a really hot pickup just 2-3 weeks ago. What do you say, Josh?
Yeah, you cannot play any Chicago Bears this week.
You can't.
You can't do it. And I actually think John Brown, Kay, you said it a couple weeks ago, I'll say it now, could have some big plays against the Carolina Panthers.
Hey, Jay Cutler, have Brian Hoyer come in and play this incredible stretch of games and then get hurt, and then you get your job back over Matt Barkley, who was dreadful and targeted Cameron Meredith twice in that game. And then
you get Minnesota.
And then here's the matchup you get for your welcome wagon. You get to take on Minnesota, who's 1,000% stifling. You cannot play anybody on Chicago. Sorry.
All right, lots to talk about bad receivers in that segment. There are some good ones, I think, somewhere in the National Football League, and definitely on Josh's daily team. He's got A.J. Green and Julio Jones in his lineup. But that's not the story. It's what he did with the rest of the roster to afford those star receivers that's really interesting. We go DFS next here on Real Fantasy. All right, welcome back to Real Fantasy. I'm Sebastian Salazar. Time now for our fantasy formula, where we turn our attention to the daily game. Big questions. Do you spend big money at QB or wide receiver or running back? All tough choices. Will help you make them. And in case you're new to Real Fantasy, you should know this. We have a pretty intense competition going on here on the show. Let's check out our scores from Week 7 for Josh Norris, Kay Adams, and myself. And it should be noted, all three of us did pretty well. Everyone had A.J. Green. Great decision, easy decision. They were playing the Browns. But Josh Norris did just a little better than everybody. Mike Evans, T.Y. Hilton putting him over the top. You hear some jangling. We'll get to that in a bit. I placed second. Kirk Cousins had a good game for me, as did Spencer Ware. K, a competitive third. Hunter Henry and the Titans defense costing her.
Don't patronize me with the competitive third bull. Stop it.
It's better than dead last. Hey, another week, another win for Josh. Josh, where do you? I know you're at the NBC studios. Where do you keep getting all these medals from?
I'm just, over here doing little curls with these heavy gold medals, guys. Just try to get the workout in when I can. I'm too busy looking at all this fantasy football that I don't have time to work out, so why not do it right now, I thought.
NBC Sports covers the Olympics. They don't give out Olympic medals. What are you doing over there?
I know. Kay, we got to put an end to this as soon as possible. All right, so
not happening.
Let's check out the teams for this week. And Josh looking to keep rolling, spending big at wide receiver with three of the best point-per-game wideouts in the game right now. He saved a little at running back. Spencer Ware and Devontae Booker, a real popular play in the backfield. And he'll roll with Alex Smith in Indianapolis. For Miss Adams, can't believe what I'm seeing on her roster. She'll explain it. Ryan Fitzpatrick gets the nod at $7,300. Kristen Michael and Jaquiz Rogers in her backfield. Julio Jones, Brandon Marshall, and Will Fuller at wideout. And I think this is the first appearance in DFS, at least on this show, for the Polish cannon, Sebastian Janikowski. And here's my team, because you're all dying to see it. You'll notice a theme. I'm getting up early to watch the Bengals and Redskins in London. The football doesn't travel well, but they will score some points. I got a lot of Bengals on the team.
Oh, wow, Sebastian.
I also signed Kay's favorite player, LeGarrette Blount, and Raiders receiver Michael Crabtree. He's going to round out my squad. All right, so Kay, we're going to start with you. I got to ask, Ryan Fitzpatrick, I know he's playing Cleveland, but is there any other reason you're going with Fitzy here?
Because look at my wide receivers. I spent very little on my quarterback, and now I am stacked at wideout. And I like Fitzy in this matchup. The Browns give up the second most points to opposing quarterbacks. Fitzpatrick is back. He's feeling himself. He's feeling confident yet. Brandon Marshall show up wearing the Fitzmagic t-shirt to work this week. This bromance is going to be reignited against Cleveland. And if you look at some of the matchups that Fitzpatrick had leading up to this, it was Arizona, it was Seattle, it was Buffalo, it was Kansas City. That's a pretty rough stretch. This is a great matchup to rebound. I love it.
Plenty of teams have put their faith in Ryan Fitzpatrick, Adams. You just go ahead and keep doing it. All right, Josh, we see you spent big on receiver, but you also stacked Chiefs. Not the usual QB receiver or QB tight end stack, though. You went with Alex Smith and Spencer Ware. Why?
Well, I think the quarterback-running back correlation is nice because I want exposure to every single person going up against the Indianapolis Colts that I could. In fact, if I had another $100, I'd put the kicker in there. I'd put Cairo Santos in there as well. Look, the Colts are giving up a touchdown or a scoring drive on 50% of their opponent's drives. That's absolutely nuts. And I understand that Alex Smith only has 46 passing attempts over the last 2 weeks. I think even if he only throws the ball 30 times in this game, he puts up maybe 15, 20 points, and that's already a return on investment here for FanDuel.
All right, Josh, you think you went big on the Chiefs? Let me show you how you go big on a team. All right? Not one, not two, not three, but four Cincinnati Bengals as they head to London to play the Redskins. I would ask you guys if you're impressed. I'll pull back the curtain. I know you're not. Tell me I'm not crazy, though. I think the Redskins, while they have been playing better on defense, they're banged up, could be a chance for the Bengals to rack up some points. I want to take advantage.
Why are you starting Tyler Eifert? Like, why are you playing Tyler Eifert in a situation when you have a choice to play all these other tight ends? When Tyler Eifert's healthy, Kay, he's amazing. We just don't know his role. He played on third downs and he played in the red zone. Like, very limited exposure for a great player, but just I would not play him in the situation, Kay. What about you?
There's a lot of other tight ends, even Jackie Doyle against Kansas City. They at least get to be at home. CJ Fedorowicz, the Polar sensation, he's on my team with Janikowski. I have the all-Polar squad. What up? But, no, I'm not liking it. I do think this will be a huge game for Gio Bernard.
Nice. All right, thank you, guys. I appreciate a little bit of confidence, if not in my team, at least in the Bengals overall. I'm going to go change my lineup now. Look, this is quickly becoming my new favorite part of the show. We check in with our newest fantasy football player. You may have heard of him, Charlie Casserly. He ignores everything Josh says and doesn't worry about matchups at all. So Charlie's definitely not worried about Carolina's skill guys going up against the Cardinals secondary.
Well, I think one of the things you have to do in fantasy football is don't always so get consumed about what the other team has. Know who your players are. If you have good players, pick them and play them every week. Well, I have Greg Olsen. He's playing. That's it. I don't care what the matchup is because Newton is going to go to him. I think Olsen will have a bigger game than Benjamin. You can take Benjamin out of the game with Peterson. I don't think you can take Olsen out of the game. But go with your good players and just play them.
All right, there it is. Matchups be damned, says Charlie Cassidy. All right, guys, before we get to our crystal ball, I do want to go back to Charlie for a second. We've mentioned that Charlie is a first-year fantasy player, so he's getting a hang of it. We've also mentioned he's in a league with Kay. So last week, Charlie was on Geico Sportsnet Central with Julie Donaldson, and he wanted to let Kay know exactly how he was doing. Let's listen in.
She's ripping me this morning about one of my comments last week. Hey, Kate, I'm ripping you right now. They can take anybody on this one. I'm going to get you next week.
Aren't you on a team together, though?
No, we're in the same league. She talked me into this thing. Okay? She talked me into it, and now they're mad because I'm in first place.
Wow.
Is Charlie really in first place, Kay?
Charlie's Angels is crushing it, but it's outrageous. He does have Greg Olsen. Greg Olsen is on the bench in lieu of Kyle Rudolph right now. He has 3 quarterbacks. How do you have Phillip Rivers and Andrew Luck and Matthew Stafford, and you're clowning all of us? It's really unbelievable. Charlie is a gem.
He's GMing this thing like it was a real team. All right, let's get to the crystal ball. Des Bryant returns from injury, plays the Eagles. What do you think we can expect from Des, Josh?
I don't think very much. Maybe 3 catches for 45 yards. Look, Dallas, you know what they're going to do. They're going to run the ball, and teams just can't stop them. I don't want to play players coming off multiple week injuries, and especially the lower half. So Des Bryant not playing you in any lineups.
All right, Kay,
I was going to say 4 for 46, so I will say 4 for 50.
Guys, bye week's killing everybody this week, so time for our weekly stream sleeper question. Josh, if you're streaming a quarterback this week, who's it going to be?
Well, I'll cheat a little bit. I refuse to talk about Ryan Fitzpatrick, refuse to talk about Brock Osweiler. How about Jameis Winston against the Oakland Raiders? He might be on your roster, but you should start him. It's a high-scoring week, and we know that the Raiders give up the most red zone trips than any other team, so put Jameis Winston in your lineup this week.
Okay, I'm not naming any names, but there's some people who are desperate, maybe 2 and 5 in their leagues. I'm looking for a deep sleeper, any position for week 8. Give me one.
Sebastian, at the tight end spot, go hit free agency and pick up C.J. Fedorowicz. I liked him last week before I even saw him play, but he's got 2 touchdowns. 2 touchdowns in 4 games. He's going up against the Lions, and that's why I like him. You just saw what Jack Doyle did against them weeks ago. Vernon Davis just coming off a nice game, almost had a touchdown and over 70 yards. Play C.J. Fedorowicz this week. It's a lock.
Guys, great stuff as always. That's it for us here on Real Fantasy. Don't forget to join us next Wednesday at 2:45 p.m. for Facebook Live, where our team will answer all your fantasy questions. For Kay Adams and Josh Norris, I'm Sebastian Salazar. Thanks for watching, and good luck in Week 8.